Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. Today, my guest is Timothy Hughes. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm really well. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm excited to get started.
I'm excited to have you on. Look, you're based in London right now, aren't you?
I am based in London, yes.
What's the weather like there? It's pretty bad right here.
It's a bit overcast. It's very
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, is there any rain? Because we've had a little bit of rain as well over here.
no, we had a beautiful day yesterday. It was like summer yesterday. But
Oh.
it's decided to the sun's decided to pop away for a bit.
That's just typical, British weather. Yeah, yesterday for us, it wasn't as overcast as today, but it was similar. But Saturday and Sunday, those were the really good days over where I am. Yeah, it was fantastic. I'm hoping we get some more of those days. Enough to get the barbecue out.
Absolutely. And call it summer.
Yes, because it's difficult to call summer summer if you get a couple of good days here and there. You get a
Yeah.
couple of good days in winter,
Yeah.
so, it's hard to call it summer if you don't get like a good run. So we'll start with what you're doing right now. You're CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Do you want to talk a little bit about what DLA is and your involvement?
Yes, so I'm CEO and co-founder. I started the business with my business partner Adam Gray, and what we do is that we focus totally on training and coaching people to use our social selling methodology. Um, we started the business. We're coming up to our eighth year, and yeah, it's been going well, and we've been having a lot of success. So we're really pleased with it.
Okay. So what, in a nutshell, what is this, social selling methodology that you're, talking about? And, what sort of, industries or careers, would that apply to? Is it just generally anyone that's selling or is it, a specific, subset?
Okay, so the first question, what is it? We've defined social selling as using your presence and behavior on social media to build influence, make connections, grow relationship and trust, which lead to conversation and commercial interaction. So what we're doing is that we're using social media as a mechanism for people to generate meetings. They then have conversations, and then the conversations create sales. Anybody that's looking to win business, rather than using some of the legacy methods of cold calling and sending people spam emails, what we find is that our social selling methodology has far greater output. Um, a classic sales development person, SDR, is that's using our methodology is getting something like 10 meetings a week. A good one is getting 25. So that's, exponentially over, something like cold calling or sending spam emails. In terms of the markets that we work in, we work generally within business to business. The only business to consumer market that we work in is where it's a considered purchase. So, for example, BMW is a client of ours because if you're going to go and buy a BMW, you're probably going to consider the purchase, even though that they're selling to consumers. But mostly, it's business to business. In terms of verticals, we haven't found a vertical that it doesn't work in. We've even just got a guy in France, and he's implemented the methodology, and he's got it to work in France. We're not seeing political, religion, language, or anything being a barrier to the methodology that we've created. So we're very proud of that.
Okay. And you mentioned, using, your presence online from a social media perspective. Is there sort of like a minimum size that you would recommend somebody would require, in terms of a presence online to be able to really take advantage of the social selling method? Or does part of it involve growing that audience? Or is it just an assumption that if you are able to grow the audience, then you can leverage the audience to, sell.
So there's three things that you need. One is what we call a buyer-centric profile. So that's a profile on social media that that buyers will be interested in. So it's not what the seller is interested in; it's what the buyer is interested in. And if you think about the fact that things have changed, we use search very differently. So there's a guy on LinkedIn called Simon Kemp. He's a great person to follow because he creates data of the number of people that are on social media. So, for example, 2/3 of the world's population are on the internet. So 67% of the world's population are on the internet and are online. 62% of those are on social media and are active. And active on social media means that the average person spends 2 hours, 20 minutes a day on social media. So we know that if you're say you're using LinkedIn, in effect, there's a billion people on it, and they're walking past your profile every single day. What you want them to do is to stop and go, "That looks interesting," rather than just to keep walking past. We've got clients that are doing multi-million-dollar deals by using social media. So this isn't something that is people are using because and they're getting $100 or something like that. People are using it to get business to business enterprise deals. So the first thing that you need is a buyer centric profile. You need to look good in the buyer's eyes. The second thing you need is a wide and varied network. Ultimately, it's a digital territory. Um, the way that search works on social media, or certainly on LinkedIn, is it searches based on who you're connected to, not necessarily what you're searching on. So if you're not connected to the people that you're trying to influence, you're invisible to them. And the third thing you need is content, and content which is interesting to your buyers, not necessarily interesting to your marketing department, because social media is a social platform. It's a platform about connecting humans. It's not about business. I'm not interested in your business. I'm not interested in your brochures or your brochureware or the fact that you've just done a sales kickoff or anything like that. What I'm interested in is you, and the connection that I get from a human perspective. So just to summarize, the three things you need is a buyer centric profile, a wide and varied network, and you need content.
Okay. And to access the social selling method, what is it? Is it through a book that you've published? Is it through some sort of online course? Is it through, I don't know, a podcast? And or is it a mixture? And then also, what's the sort of, financial investment somebody would, require to access, this method?
So what we've done is that I've written 3 books. So if you want to get a book, and you read books, there's my book on Amazon, which is called Social Selling: Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. That's now in a second edition, so you want the one with the yellow cover, and that provides an overview to people in terms of what they can do for social selling. We also do face-to-face coaching and training around what social is about. So what we do is that we train people in our methodology. It's a process that people go through, and there is a computer-based version if people want that. Most people go for the training and the coaching, and they do that from a face-to-face perspective.
Okay. And have you always been, in selling? Because you've had a pretty, busy career working at companies like Oracle, Capgemini, Fujitsu. And how did you get into, selling?
So I've been in sales now for 25 years. I've always been in the environment where I'm selling business to business. My background is in new business sales, which is about finding opportunity and then creating trust very, very quickly. And I've worked in all kinds of different marketplaces. And then when I was in my 40s, I kind of got bored of it and I decided to look for something else. And I got involved in social media, and kind of brought the two things together: my understanding of sales and the process, and also my understanding of social media, and blending them together. And I knew when I was going down this path that there had to be a methodology, there had to be a process. It wasn't a case of just saying, going onto social media and saying you need to do this, you need to do that. You need to basically put it through together in a process, and people need to be able to run that process. And otherwise, you're really dealing in luck. And what you want to do is make sure that you've got a process that works. So it's really the interweaving of my sales experience and my social media the experience that I enabled me to come up with the methodology.
So, social media has been around, Facebook, aka Meta, for about, 20 years now. Actually, it's
Yeah.
the 20th anniversary this year. 10, 15 years more in the way that we know it, and, selling stuff online and getting, that
So
sort of
I've been
audience.
on LinkedIn for 19 years, and I've been on Twitter for 15 years. So that's gives you an idea about how social media, how long it's been around.
Yeah, but obviously, you've been working, since the 80s at companies like, Fujitsu. So, what was you selling, before social media was a thing? What was the main thing? Was it literally just like, well, hardware or software? What was it?
So my background has been selling software. I started selling human resources and payroll software. I then moved on to selling accounting software, and I've pretty much sold that then for the rest of my career. Um, it was, yeah, and I've always done that, and it's always been in the business to business enterprise arena.
Okay, and I feel like sales is one of those techniques and areas of life that virtually everyone needs, even if you're not selling, a piece of software for, $100, for example. Even if you're going for an interview, you're selling the employer on, I will be able to, add more value than, you are, giving me, in terms of,
Yes,
dollar, pound
you,
value.
yep. So I mean, if you go for a job interview, you're selling yourself.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you learn to sell from a baby because ultimately, what you do is you manipulate your parents to make sure that
I
you
know
get
all
money.
about that with my kids because they're, at the young stage. Now, or as the parents, you try and sell them on doing something that they don't want to do. It goes
Yes,
both ways.
yeah, it does. Yeah, and so we're always using sales in some shape or form in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, because it's so important and it's very rarely taught in the general sense, like, as in like just generally, okay, you have to learn sales. As you're growing up, it's just not really talked about. What are the top three things in closing? I'm gonna say a deal. It doesn't even have to be a financial deal, just in because I'm sure there's must be similarities in you closing a deal with your kid to do something versus a client closing a software deal, and at what point or sort of what key things do you look out for to say, okay, this is not a deal that can be closed, I walk away.
So, as part of any opportunity, what you would do is that you would qualify it. The thing is that somebody is unlikely to buy something unless they have a need for it, and more importantly, they have a compelling reason to have it. So, one of the things that you need to do is you'll use questioning or presenting to the person about why they need something. So it may be you need to point out the fact that they're lacking something, and what they're lacking then is what you're selling is going to help them solve that problem.
Okay. And, uh, obviously, that's a very important part, trying to find someone that, lacks what you have, could, also, benefit, from it as well. Because if they don't have it, but in reality, for what they want, to do, their goals, if it's not really going to, benefit them, take some sort of, tradesman, for example, or like a gardener. I spoke to gardeners before, and especially as a software developer doing freelance work, like trying to sell them a website, and their response, is, I'm fully booked up for the next few months anyway without a website. How much more could you do for me if I don't want to grow beyond this? Like, and then it is a matter of they're probably not the right target for that particular sort of product. So how do you go about finding the right, customer, the right buyer, so you can actually close them?
So the first thing you need to do is you need to work out what your ideal customer profile is, or ICP. So you need to work out the type of people that you would like to sell to. Um, they're the type of people that ultimately are going to buy. So what that means is that you shouldn't be wasting time with people that are not going to buy from you. So, for example, if somebody's already full up with work, then they're not going to buy from you. So you're wasting your time. You need to find somebody that isn't full up with work. And the classic thing is nowadays is what would happen is that if people know that they have a problem, then generally what they will do is that they're searching for the answer to that problem, and they'll do that on a search engine. They'll do that on social media, two different formats. So in that case, what they're doing is that they're looking for an answer to the problem. People also go to social media because they're actually doing what we call discovery, which is where they may not know they have a problem, and it's they're in effect just walking down a high street, and they may be looking in the shop windows, but they don't necessarily know that they have a problem. And what they're doing on social media is looking into your shop window and going, that looks interesting. I didn't realize I had that problem. And then ultimately, then walk the metaphor example of them walking into a digital shop and having a conversation. So at the moment, it all depends on how the buyers looking, or how they're searching, and also how the seller is presenting themselves online, so they're found.
Okay. And working, in software, uh, do you have a software, background? Do you have, experience in making software, or, anything like that? And then as a follow-up question, how important is, domain and industry knowledge to what you are trying to sell? So, software, how much, skills, sort of knowledge do you, require? Is it a matter of, just got to have gift of the gab, you got to be able to, just sell it, and throw a few jargon terms out there, or does it really help that you actually kind of know what you're selling, even if you don't know how to make it?
So I have no software development experience. I did some programming when I was at school, but I wasn't particularly good at it. You don't need to know um, software programming at all. All you need to know is understand the features and functions, and then the benefits of what it is that you're selling. So my background is selling accounting software, and it's about understanding um, the process flow of what takes place within an accounting department, and understanding where they have the problems, and how you can solve that and the benefits of that. And that's the same with pretty much any software application. You don't need in terms of Facebook on your mobile phone, even on your desktop. You don't actually need to understand how the program works. You just need to know how the functions work of the app. It's not something that you need to know the detail of.
Okay. So when you was, in general when you sell, but especially when you're selling software, and I'm guessing to maybe sometimes in, speaking to individuals that had more knowledge than you was, just the software, industry itself and how it all worked. Did you ever get, sort of pushback, or the feeling where there was kind of, judging you that, you clearly don't know as much as them about, the domain itself, about software? Or was the sort of people you were speaking to not really, didn't care about that?
I think that there's at no place I've ever needed to know the detail or the technicalities of the software. It's always been about understanding the process. Um, so I went and worked for a company that sold accounting software, and it was really about listening to what was going on, and asking questions about why people thought that was um, why people thought they had particular business issues, and listening to other people, asking questions, and also not being afraid to ask why something was like it was. Even to customers. I mean, I would often talk to customers and say, okay, so why is this an issue for you? Um, and For example, I sold accounting systems to the NHS. And one of the issues that they have is road traffic accidents, um, or RTAs. And it's a fixed amount which they have to invoice to people that have had road traffic accidents. And it's a very small amount. So um, the NHS are not very good at billing people because they don't generally bill people. And When they do, they have to billing people at very small amounts, and it's very difficult to collect that. So I only know that. I've never worked in an accounting department in the NHS. All I know is by talking to people and listening to people and saying, so what's an RTA? So how does that work? And so what's the issue with you? So how why are they a problem for you? So all the information that I know about accounting, certainly in that I've picked up to sell accounting systems, is where I've talked to people and listened to what they said and asked them questions. Most people are more than happy to explain to you. In fact, most people prefer that you ask the question rather than just assume that you know. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, you know, I do, and I think that's an important part of knowing that when you are selling, if you have the confidence and don't doubt yourself that okay, just because I don't know it on a certain level, I can't almost you sometimes you might feel like a fraud, but because your job is to sell the product and all the details required, and like you said, you can identify a problem within that particular client's workflow, and they need this accounting software, they need this software, or they need this, whatever it is, that's one of the the main things of selling. So selling is one of those very interesting things. Like, a lot of people don't quite know how to get into it. You hear about it. It's there's several movies made around the idea of selling. Wolf of Wall Street, Wall Street, and then several other ones as well. Like the depictions in movies. How accurate is that to real life selling? Is there any sort of truth in what you see in movies around selling? There's that other movie with, I think, Alec Baldwin, about selling as well. I can't remember the name, but the like, is there any truth in what you see in the movies?
Um, in a way, they're there to show the sales process in a particular way. The Wolf of Wall Street is based on a true story.
Yes.
And in terms of what they were doing, in terms of selling people stock and making a lot of money in those days, that was probably right. Certainly, during certain times, people have um, sold people things that probably didn't work.
Oh yeah. So, what my question really is, like, movies like Wolf of Wall Street, are they more again, something like Wolf of Wall Street is based on real life, and from what I read, apparently the movie is actually toned down, compared to how it actually was, hard as that is to believe after watching the movie. But is that the norm in how sales
It's
are?
not the norm, no, no, no,
No.
not at all,
You,
no.
you don't have those crazy things in the
No,
office
no,
and
no, no, no,
people
no.
eating
And that was
goldfish.
it was a point in time where um, there was a lot of money around and people were investing it in the stock market. And um, But ultimately, I'm sure there was a person that was in that situation who probably earned that sort of money. but it's not something that is normal. It's an exception rather than the rule. Um, but there are you mentioned something earlier on about the gift of the gab. You don't um, being in sales doesn't mean that you need to be an extrovert. I'm an introvert, and the thing that you need to in sales is you need to be able to ask questions. You need to be able to understand from the people that you're talking to their business issues, their needs. Um, you need to understand the power plays that are going on, because there's always politics in an organization. There are always people that get on with each other, and there are always people that don't get on with each other. And it's important to understand that. Um, Most people, when they buy, will buy because of themselves. So it's called a personal win. What is it that um, to from my background selling accounting systems, what is it that a person will gain from the purchase of that? And I remember I've sold to a number of people where what they wanted was, I work for an American software company called Oracle, and what they wanted was to have Oracle on their CV. So they weren't buying necessarily the best product, or they weren't buying necessarily the product that best suited the organization that they work for, because at the end of the day, it's not their money. When people are spending 50, 250, or £1 million pounds or dollars on a system, it's not their money. What they're doing is that they're justifying to the leadership in that business that this is the right solution. But ultimately, underlying, lots of people have bought from me purely because they wanted to have or say that they've worked on an Oracle project, because that was good for their career.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. When you're, getting a job as well. For example, you want to, it holds a lot of weight to be able to say, I worked on Microsoft. Well, you see all the time, ex
Yes.
Microsoft, ex, this, ex that. They don't put ex local firm on the high street. It is always one of those big companies, that you've heard of. And even if the experience of being there was unpleasant, or you prefer, one of the other smaller companies, because it holds weight, I see it all the time. Like that, it'll be like 4 different X's, like four, ex Google, ex Meta, ex Amazon, ex Netflix, and it's like, did you not like them enough to stay, or did they not? Did they not like you enough
It
to
always
keep
makes
you?
me laugh when people do that. So you got fired 4 times. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
or you
but
left for
yes,
some reason.
but yes, people make people, and I think this is important for people that either are in sales or or thinking about sales, is that you know people will often think, well, I have the best solution on the marketplace. The best solution doesn't necessarily win. And when I first started in sales, I wanted to work at Oracle. Oracle's biggest competitor at that time, and this is going back 20, maybe 25 years ago, their biggest competitor was a company called Ingress. Now, Ingress was by far the better product. Ingress doesn't exist anymore, whereas Oracle does. And the reason why Oracle exists is because they were better at selling. And I'm just pointing out that you don't have to. It's not necessarily about your sales ability. It's about your understanding of the client issues. But it's you don't actually have to have the best product. You need to understand that people are buying the product based on their own personal win, and it's you have to. One of the questions you have to ask people is, when they're buying from you, is you just say to them, so what do you get out of this?
Oh yeah.
And at that point, you have to say what, because it's an open question, but you just say, what did you get out of this? And then you go quiet. And so if I say, what do you get out of this? And do the quiet, because and just keep quiet, at some point they will tell you what their personal win is for that particular purchase.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of sales, whether it's going and buying a pair of trainers or a bag or, buying, like you said, software on a larger scale, maybe tens, hundreds of millions, or even in the, context of billions of dollars. A lot of it is, I guess the brand value, the community around, around what you are, buying. Even if, like you said, there's a better alternative, if it's a less, let's say, riskier option, whether that's riskier in terms of to the business or to your own career, because ultimately, when you was selling, working for Fujitsu or Oracle and selling, their products, to someone, you wasn't talking to every employee in the business that you were selling to. You was talking to maybe one, maybe two, employees. So it was them making that decision, and part of that is, okay, if I make this decision and it goes wrong, because it's a safe, considered to be a safe one, I can kind of not, I can, step back and say, it's not my fault. Whereas if I chose the better option, which was clearly let's say technically the better option, but if shit hits the fan, because it had no support, it had no community, it had no recognition, I'm gonna get blamed because I didn't go with the safe option. So there's, like I said with Oracle, it's like how Apple is now, like, and Google. There's sort of a lot of, fanaticism, around, the products and the company, and that's what, people, are buying. I remember when I was working at Accenture I was just as a placement year when I was at uni, so that was 2012 to 2013, and we was working on DWP, the Universal Credit System. I'm sure you've heard of that system being in
Yes.
the UK.
Yep.
Yeah, so we was working, obviously that was before it came out. So we was working on that. So the government had outsourced the majority of it to Accenture, which was a consultancy firm, and a lot of the tech side, Accenture had outsourced and worked with IBM. The stuff that IBM was providing was rubbish. I mean, relative to the money that they was, given to them, because I had enough exposure, and we did in general, to the, the numbers, because it was the biggest project that Accenture had. The management over at the DWP project was very proud of that, so they was, shouting the numbers, every chance they got, to basically show off how big the project, was. And then how much money they was get at the time. It was like 500 mil basically for a website, effectively. Now it's, running to the billions, and you see it, and it's like, a few guys out in uni could make it do a better job, but it's a safe option. Yes, they have certain insurances, but it's that trusted consultancy firm. IBM's a trusted, tech firm within enterprise now, and they were safe options. So they weren't like UK government was not buying the best solution. By far, it was not the best solution. Having worked on it and seen all the problems with it, and just in general, just looking at it, recently, and seeing how overall bad it is. It was the safe option. It was the option that would, nobody would bat an eyelid if something goes wrong, and they know it's kind of going to be okay.
Yeah, and if someone criticizes it, they say, "Well, we went to the two of the best companies in the world, Accenture and IBM."
Yeah. We
And
paid a
if
lot of money.
Yeah, yeah,
We
and
didn't
yeah,
stint.
but if the government said, "Yeah, we went to three guys at Loughborough University," people would say, "What, you spent taxpayers' money with people, three guys
Mm.
from Loughborough University? Why would you do that?" Whereas um, there's an old saying, and when IBM were far more dominant than they are now, there was an old saying that you never get fired by buying IBM, and I think it's what you've seen there, and there's lots of other people, um, brand names that you could drop into the you'd never get fired by buying
Microsoft is the new
Google, or
IBM in
you'd
enterprise
never get fired
side.
by buying Microsoft, or
No.
or that sort of stuff. So and people will make decisions because it's a safe option. People will make decisions. People will have walked away from that project saying, "I worked on a big project with Accenture and IBM," and they would have gone and got jobs off the back of it.
Oh yeah, 100%. If you just say, oh yeah, Accenture or IBM, even if you do the name drops, it holds a lot of weight. I hated my 1 year there. I made it very clear to even the management, because I knew I was there for a year and I was out. So I didn't really care what people thought of me at the whilst I was there, and I was a little less. I was a little more immature as well, at the time. But there's to this day, if I bring that up, people are like, "Oh, Accenture, is big." Like, even though I could tell them how bad, not just my experience, but how bad it was done internally in terms of the products and the services they were providing relative for the money, because of the name, the value is there. And obviously that's a very big part of it. It's so another thing that you mentioned was that you're an introvert, that selling isn't just for extroverts. I know a lot of let's say software developers, they have this thing, they don't want to present too much, they don't want to try and sell in some fashion, do talks. A lot of them are introverted. So with sales, is there one that you would say overall wins over introvert versus extrovert? Do you see more of one type or not really?
I don't think so. I don't think that there is a particular type of extrovert or introvert. I'm an introverted person, though I've stood on the stage and I've given presentations to 250 people. It's not. I don't think Quite often people think that sales is all about the gift of the gab and being able to talk, and sales isn't about being able to talk. It's about being able to listen, and quite often that's about introverted people listening, thinking, and then asking questions. But you can be just as much as being extrovert. You need to build trust with your buyers. You need to have conversations with your buyers. They're all things that both introverts and extroverts can have. Um, I know some people don't like um, having conversations or interacting, but you get used to it. And I think that there's grades of there are some very extrovert people who shouldn't be in sales at all, because, as I say, all they do is talk and they don't listen. And maybe there are people who are very introverted who shouldn't be in sales because they just don't are not comfortable with they're not comfortable with talking. But for me, I'm not looking. If I'm looking for a salesperson, I'm not looking for somebody who's extroverted. I'm not looking for somebody who's introverted. I'm looking for somebody can that can have conversations, that have curiosity, that is interested in why something happens or why did something happen, um, and and then understanding and asking questions and asking questions of people to work out whether they have particular issues and whether they have issues with the particular process. So you can find out whether there's ultimately what you're doing when you're selling is that the client will have a problem, you have a solution, and what you're doing is you're matching one to the other. So what you're trying to do at um, all instances is ask the questions to find out whether they have the issues. If they don't, then you need to try and uncover that they may do, because most people probably have the business issues, they just don't know that they've got them. And then what you're trying to do is match your solution in some shape or form to that individual or that organization. So you can go, you have this problem, we have this solution. um, and if there's a match, then hopefully there will be a process of going through the process of actually buying.
So you said you don't like presentations and talks. Is that as an
No, no, no.
introvert?
I do presentations and talks. I'm in fact, I'm a public speaker. I've spoken in front of 250 people. Um, but if you look at what an introvert is, um, I match all those things. And what I'm saying is that there are a lot of introverts who still do public speaking and that. And I'm sure that there are some introverts who just want to go and hide in the corner and not have to deal with that. But I still enjoy public speaking, not as much as who my business partner who actually is an extrovert and actually trained in the violin, and he sees a presentation to be a um, in effect is about entertainment and standing on the stage, just as much as a presentation is the same as standing on the stage and playing a violin. But I've I give presentations. I'm a public speaker, and I still do that, even though I would see myself as an introvert.
Okay. So like is that something that you found difficult initially, doing the talks and the presentation, then it's come more natural to you now, and before you do it, regardless of how good your performance is, before you do it, do you have a bit of anxiety, or like you're thinking, this is a bit uncomfortable, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna perform, but this is a bit uncomfortable compared to something else, and then in comparison to your business partner, is he the type of person that is like just ready to run onto stage, Tony Robbins style, all energy, like
Yeah. Adam is probably more Tony Robbins. I mean, I was very lucky that I joined what is now Fujitsu, and I went through a graduate training. Part of that training was how to give presentations, but as we talked about earlier on, the ability to sell is something that we use through our career. People will find that the ability to give a presentation is something that you'll use through your career. So it's in the work that I've been in, it is pretty normal that you would take ideas and have to present them to people within an organization. So you may not be selling a product, but you may be selling an idea. You may be selling a new process. So for example, just something simple like you work for a company and it's been decided that, well, you've decided that they ought to use a CRM, a customer relationship management system, to hold information about the sales they're going to make, the customers, etc. As a person in a company, of course, you will have the CRM salesperson selling to you, but what you will have to do is sell that internally to the organization. You're going to need to sell that the spend of why you need to have a CRM, why you need to spend that money, why you need to invest, and the money that you need to spend just not just on the software but also the implementation. That is something that you may need to do. So what we need to learn how to be able to give presentations and share information, and part information to people, just as much as we need to sell, and we need to be able to do that just as much as internally as externally. Do I ever get nervous before I give a presentation? Yes, I do, and I think it's important that you get nervous. Personally, when I do presentations, I do dry runs after dry runs after dry runs after dry runs after dry runs, because what I want to do is I want to make sure that what I'm saying is fits the time that I've got it in. So if it's a 30-minute presentation, I don't take 35 minutes. I take 29 minutes because it needs to fit in the 30-minute time block. I also need to make sure that what I'm doing is I'm parting the information over in a way that people are going to understand, and I'm also doing it in a way that you're able to use your body and your hand gestures to support what you're saying. And if you're standing on stage, you need to do that. So if you ever watch just go and watch some TED Talks and watch people are doing what they're doing on the stage. And a TED Talk is a very defined process that people go through in terms of the presentation. It's a particular length. You give information at a particular time, and you're taught how to use hand gestures to back up what you're saying. So any TED Talk, if you go to TED.com and look at any of the TED Talks, you will see a mechanism in which presentations are given using all of those skills, and we need to have those if we're giving presentations in internally or within industry or at a conference or whatever.
So the TED talks, that you're talking about. So what sort of training is going on there? How extensive is that? You're saying that if you go and watch any TED talks, there'll be a lot of similarities with their hand gestures, with their movements. With, I guess, their pacing as well. Yeah, and having watched a fair few TED talks over the years, just thinking about it. Yeah, you are right. There's a fair bit of similarity in the presentation, even though the topic may be very different, and the individual may be young or whatever, junior, CEO. Like, there's definitely similarity. So what sort of training is going on, and how extensive is it?
So TED have a particular training. If you go for a TED, if you apply and they accept you as on a TED talk, they actually take you through um, uh, a presentation techniques course, which is over about 3 months. And one of the reasons why TED is so is so important, or because TED is used by so many people, is that they know that they're going to get this training. So you go through a process of at the TED talk, what you'll find is that there's always an opening statement, and that opening statement is a hook that you have to stand in a particular place. That if you say I'm going to tell you about three things about this presentation, and and you can't see this, but I'm holding up three fingers. So what you do is that you're taught how to present and how to how to also maybe show movement. So you may say, um, I did this in my in my in my job, and then I did that. And what to emphasize that when you did this, you'd go over to one side of the stage, and as you said, and I did that, you'd walk over to the other side of the stage to show the difference. And as part of TED. So one of the people that who used to work for me did a TED talk, and I basically, because he would come every week and said, "This is what we've done." So and I also helped to coach him through the process. So while I've not done the TED talk, I know somebody who's been doing it, and they teach you presentation skills for doing the TED talk. But those skills, they're life skills that nobody can take away from you. And so what they're doing is that they're actually teaching you really good presentation skills that you would then be able to take on and go somewhere else. But if you get on a graduate scheme or something, they should be giving you and training you in things like presentation skills, because we all need to be able to give them, not just if you want to be a public speaker, but as I said, because we start having to give presentations. So, for example, if you want to get a job at Salesforce, and in sales, if you want to get a job at Microsoft or IBM in sales, you have to give a presentation. That
I
would
mean,
be
it's not just in sales. Like,
that would
as
be
a software
part of the
developer,
interview process.
yeah, it happens in all sorts of industry.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, like, like saying, as a software developer, if you do an interview, that is effectively a presentation in a way,
Yes, it is. Yeah.
w- with back and forth. So it's like a presentation with a lot of audience interaction, meaning the employer. But then also, I've been on interviews where they've literally said, "We want you to make a presentation. Like, here's a list of topics, choose one, make a presentation, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Go."
Yeah.
And even though it's not a selling job, it is still them seeing how well you can communicate, because ultimately you're going to have to communicate with if you're a front end developer, you're communicating with a back end developer or a manager or another team or maybe with a client. The communication is such a key part, and sometimes the communication side, because it breaks down, for whatever reason, it can actually hinder the progress of the company's goals.
Yeah.
So yeah, communication is such a big part, and it's like I say, it's just not really talked about. It's like many things in life. Financial literacy, not really talked about. Growing up, selling and like communicating, and we all. I mean, did you go to school in the UK, Tim?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah, so you would have learned, English, as one of your, subjects, back in the day. I mean, I'm guessing when you did GCSEs, you would have been called O levels.
Yes, there were. Yes.
Yes, yeah, I know that because my dad always calls them O levels, even though he's in a high school education and has been a governor, etc. He still calls them O levels instead of GCSEs. But yeah, you would have learned English, but it, I found that English was never, or language in general, was never really the art of communicating, the art of really getting your point across, of really enunciating what you are saying, being concise. I feel like there was too much focus on, I'm going to quote, obviously the obvious one, but Shakespeare again.
Yeah.
Look at those things. They're all good, but if you cannot communicate, but you're just great at analyzing Shakespeare, it's not going to be that useful in life. We know that.
Yes, and I think that that certainly when I was at school, giving presentations wasn't something that you were taught. I didn't go on and do A levels. I went to technical college and did an ordinary national diploma on it in engineering, which was quite different from O levels. Because actually, we were taught to. There was a number of things that we were taught to do, and one of the things that we were taught was how to give a presentation. So yes, but classic school doesn't teach you how to budget. It doesn't teach you how to present. It doesn't teach you how to sell. And quite often, you need to go and find those skills elsewhere.
Oh yeah, you do, and it can be a lot of experimentation. Not knowing, are you getting, are you on the right path with getting these skills? Selling, like I said, financial literacy. Another one that comes to mind. At school we all do PE, physical education. In America, they call it gym. But how useful in reality for most people is it knowing how to kick a ball around? I feel like if they did a bit of maybe weight training or yoga or maybe some martial art, I feel like that would be so much more useful, in terms of physical education. And then also, the mindset around that, breathing techniques, around that, instead of just being like, okay, we're just going to go out, we're going to kick a ball, we're going to hit a tennis ball over, the net, play a bit of tennis. It's, there's so many things that are wrong in education, that they're just the wrong things, or the most, I say, the things that are going to be the least useful are taught,
Yeah.
versus sales, financial literacy, better versions of physical education, and then so many other things as well. But again, I think that's a huge topic for another day. All of the bad things about modern education, and like the Prussian education system as well, what it's effectively become. But before this becomes like a rant about that, being in the industry for all these years, Tim, I'm sure there's been changes in regulation with sales. I'm sure there was a time when you was early in your career, you could do, there were certain practices that you could do and nobody really cared whether or not you did them. I'm sure you saw it. Whereas now, it must be a lot stricter when you are selling. What are the main sort of regulations that have changed over the last 40 years?
Um, I think that there's been a lot of change that have taken place in sales. So, for example, the GDPR regulations that came out in
Hmm.
2018 are very restrictive in terms of who you can email, who you can call up. Um, and whereas, there was a time when, you could spam anybody and I don't, it's not right to say it didn't matter, but there was nobody that they could turn to. Now you can be reported. So there are a lot of changes. The fact that social media has completely changed the way that people buy. When I first started cold calling 25 years ago, people actually liked to get a cold call from you because they didn't know what was going on in the world because there was no internet. You couldn't find out if there was any other accounting systems or whatever. You so you the only way you could do that was that people were interested in talking to me, and they were asking me questions. So what does it do, and why is it different? Because they were generally interested, because there was no other way of finding out that information.
It was their news effectively on that particular
Yeah,
product or
yeah,
industry.
yeah, yeah. I was the news, yeah. And whereas, of course, that's changed now, and there are so many things you can do, to block people. You can block telephone numbers on your phone. There's legislation that stops you from calling people and stuff. So a lot of those things have changed. Also, quite often in most sales nowadays, I mean, you talked about earlier on about there being one or two people. In most sales, that Gartner say there's now something like 10 people involved in a sale from a buying perspective. And there's some recent report from a company called Sixth Sense that shows that people are in buying teams. We have one client who's a company that sells supply chain software, and they reckon that there's 100 people from the buying perspective involved in the buying process. So buying has got far more complex. When I first had started selling, you generally sold to one person in the IT department, and then gradually, the user departments got involved. Then there was the architecture department. Then finance would get involved because they'd want a business case, and you could very easily go from one person to 10 people. And as I said, this supply chain company reckon there's 100 people involved. So there's a lot of changes that have taken place in the sales environment.
Yeah, and I'm guessing back then in the early days, especially obviously it was the early days of software and computing. I'm guessing some of the clients that you were selling to, the IT department was one person. Like you were literally effectively presenting to the whole IT department because it wasn't as important of a thing as it is now.
Yeah, yes, and what that meant was that people were buying IT because of it was seen as being um, a bit like how AI at the moment seems to
Hmm.
be. People think that AI is the answer to every question. People saw IT as the oh, we need to get an IT system for this. And people would just go out and buy them, and they wouldn't know, and they wouldn't have bought an IT system before. Um, Also, during the 90s, um, there was something called, at the time it was really important, and it's funny that people don't seem to remember now because it's 24 years ago. But there was something called Y2K, which was the fact that all of the IT systems before the year 2000 had been written in a format that only allowed you to have a year with 19 as the year. So as in 1918, 1981. So they didn't ever write in the computer systems to allow you to have a 20 in the year. So what happened during the 90s? Well, people realized that on the 1st of January, the year 2000, none of the IT systems were going to work. So what happened during the 90s was that everybody had to go and change all of their IT systems to get Y2K, year 2000 compliant IT systems. So for the 5 years from the middle of the 90s up to the year 2000, there was massive change in terms of people changing IT systems. Um, and that I used the term earlier on, compelling reason. Y2K was a classic compelling reason. So you'd go into an organization and you'd say, "So, have you thought about changing your accounting system?" And they'd say no. And you'd say, "So, what are you doing about Y2K?" And they'd say, "What do you mean?" And you'd explain about the number, the year having to have a 20 in it. And they'd say, "Oh, no, it's," and then they'd say, "No, it's not Y2K compliant." And then you'd say, "Well, you got to change, otherwise your systems won't work on the 1st of January." And then there was all this hype about it, and the fact that the news saying that the world was going to stop on the 1st of January because none of the IT systems worked, and
I remember
people
that.
people were worked up into a frenzy about the whole thing. So there was a lot, there was a lot of IT systems sold in the last 5 years of the 90s because people wanted to have people thought they needed to have Y2K compliant. But that's just a way of where there was a need creating and a need to create it and a compelling reason. But that was just one of the things that happened in the past. And what we're kind of looking for as we are going forward is what's the Y2K going forward? What's the compelling reason? And one of those things right now is AI, because you can go into you can ask people, so how's AI impacting? And of course, because AI seems to have taken over from Web3 and the metaverse, there's still an opportunity though to talk to people that have got websites to say, so what are you doing about Web3? Because what your buyer is going to look for is an immersive experience rather than just a two dimensional website. So these are just some of the things that you talked about. You asked me about the past and how we can, those learnings from the past, how we can then use them in the future.
So you just brought up the topic of AI. What sort of selling opportunities is there within AI, and are you exploring any of that? Are you trying to sell AI systems or tools, or work with people to implement AI?
Um, are we using it? Yes. Are we selling it? No. And the reason for that is that um, what we teach people is to be social. So we teach people to be human, because we believe that to sell something, you have to have a conversation, and because a conversation will create a sale. We don't see um, AI being part of that process. And I'm sure someone will turn around and say, yes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace all my salespeople with chatbots. And I'll just say, well, good luck with that. Because all of the data and research shows that actually people don't like talking to chatbots. And if you automate it, then the buyer is going to automate it, and then they will sack all this. It just right now, we are not going to be automating salespeople and conversations through AI. AI doesn't have a face. Are
No.
we using it? Most definitely, we are. Um, but I think that quite often people think it's a magic answer, and it's not. Um, we had a company come to us and said they wanted to do their account planning using AI. It's not something that we normally do, but we wanted to get a practical example of AI under our belts. So we actually worked with them to do that, and it took longer than if they'd done it manually. And I think that they were expecting AI to come along and provide some magic answer really, really quickly. And actually, account planning and the number of iterations that they need to go through actually took longer. One of the things that we're doing is that with AI is that we're using it as a way of um, doing things that we either wouldn't have time to do or we wouldn't have the inclination to do. So, for example, we run across my business, we run 4 different podcasts. One particular podcast, we have a tool, and it's these are pretty normal now, that you can take the podcast, you pour it into the AI tool, and it will create a summary, it will create the keywords that you want. The summary then can be used as a blog and those sort of things, and that's all kind of pretty normal. What we decided to do was to do something different, which was um, one of my team took the summary, went to ChatGPT and said, write me a 2-minute monologue as if you are a sarcastic newsreader. And ChatGPT did that. And he did 3 months of a summary of the podcast that we did. And he did that as a sarcastic newsreader, which he then put out on TikTok. Which, as I said, he just did it for 3 months, but it was classic TikTok fodder in terms of it was sarcastic, it was funny, but we would never have sat down and actually written that ourselves. We probably could have done, but we would never have found the time to do it. So it's just one of an example of ways of using AI to do things differently rather than just automating tasks that um, that we can probably do manually anyway.
Okay. And you've kind of already touched on it, but how are you using AI specifically, in your day to day, business activities, and what tools? Again, you've mentioned, ChatGPT, but any other tools as well.
Well, we use ChatGPT. I can't remember the name of the product that we're using with the podcast. Cast Magic is the tool that we're using with the podcast. Otherwise, we're just using ChatGPT, and we're doing what probably everybody is doing, which is just trying to push our own boundaries in terms of putting in different prompts, um, and pushing forward the of what we can do. Um, we're still in the process of, for example, there's these things on LinkedIn now where you can get these badges that say you're an expert in a particular area, and you can,
I've
if
seen
you
them, yes.
if you answer those questions. So one of my team got his badge purely by basically using ChatGPT for creating the answers, and sending the answers to his son, who then liked them, and he got badges off the back of it. So just trying to see, could we get a badge by, at the end of the day, it's LinkedIn that's creating the questions based using AI. So we thought, can we get a badge using AI as a response? And we were able to do that. So there are things where people have said, I can't write. Well, you can now because you've got ChatGPT. Um, the content that it creates is pretty basic. It's fairly average, but for some people, average is good.
It is, yeah.
I mean, most research and data shows that people can soon spot something that's written by ChatGPT, and then will ignore it. But it does mean that these when people say, I can't write anything, well, you can, and you can in fact get badges that say that you're important and have a particular top voice, by using AI. So it has its uses.
So I mean, just talking about the badges on LinkedIn. So your friend, that did that.
Hmm.
Yeah, have you found that the badge actually makes much of a difference
No,
in your presence on LinkedIn, or not really?
it's made no difference at all.
So you got a fancy badge,
He's
but nobody
he's got
really
a
cares.
he's got a fancy badge, but it's made no difference to him in terms of business coming in. I think he might feel a little bit proud that he's got the badge,
Yeah.
and that, and partly, what we wanted to do was we wanted to experiment to find out whether it was possible, and it is.
Yes. Of course. Uh, So, talking about LinkedIn, LinkedIn has become, I'd say, over the last 1 to 2 years, a pretty big, platform in the way people are posting now. So yeah, over the last couple of years, like it wasn't like this a few years ago. People were still, it was still Facebook, it was still, Twitter, or X.com, as it, X as it's renamed now. And obviously you had some of the other ones like Snapchat and whatnot, obviously, slightly different, or TikTok. But LinkedIn, there's a lot of people posting on there in the frequency, that they would have posted on Facebook 10 years ago. Some of the posts are just as bad, even though a bit better written. Some of them you can tell, like you said, they're written with, with ChatGPT, from the icons, used in there, the emojis used in there, the format of it, like that's clearly ChatGPT generated. And, like, what do you see, where do you see LinkedIn going, and how are you leveraging that? Because it's become a huge, social platform in its own right for just sharing outside of a professional CV like, capacity.
Yeah, it's changed immensely, as you said. It started off as a job site where you would post your CV, and people would search for jobs, or well, or people, and it's become a platform for business. What I would still say is that it's social media. So the thing about social media is it's about connection. It's about You contacted me to come on your podcast. You didn't contact my company to come on the podcast.
Nope. Yeah.
And I'm connected to you. If you decide to go and work back at Essentia, and because you've used that as an example where you worked, um, my relationship with you carries on if you go back to work at Essentia. So, and the mistake that people make is that they think it's a business platform, as in I'm interested in your brand and I'm interested in your products, and I'm not. I'm interested in you as a human being, and that's why people are seeing that human content works far better than posting brochures or brochureware or something like that. Because what I'm doing is I'm connecting to you as a human being. So some people will often say LinkedIn is becoming more Facebook-like, and it is because of the fact it's social media, and my connection with you is on a human level. Um, and anybody who's listening to this, you can do an experiment. So today, go and post a picture of one of your brochures, take a photo of it, and post a picture of your brochures, and I can tell you, you will get no engagement on it. If you post a picture of you holding up a brochure and saying that you're really proud to work for that company, you will get engagement, because what we're liking is you. When I'm connected to you, I'm connected to you, not your company. And if you're proud about something, then I'm proud for you because you're saying that you're proud. And so, anybody can run that experiment, and you will see that LinkedIn will become more and more to do with humanity, and less about company and brand. Um, and one fact people might be interested in is that Cristiano Ronaldo, the football player or soccer player, if you're in the States, he has 7 times more followers on social media than the top 10 brands of the world put together. And
Mm.
again, the reason for that is that social media is social media, not social media. It's
Yes.
it's about being social. It's about the people. It's about human. We're interested in Cristiano Ronaldo. We're not interested as much in Samsung or Huawei or whoever it is in the top 10 brands. Personality always beats brand.
No, yeah, and if you look a lot, if you just look at YouTube now, a lot of the really top YouTubers, the sort of money they're bringing in, and effectively the organizations that have been created around their brand are, organizations that can compete with just like a regular company that doesn't have an outwardly, facing individual, but it because you feel like you just bind that one, buying into that one person, because they'll have the name of that individual as part of, the channel or the website or, their brand. And even
People
if,
are interested in people. LinkedIn's own research shows that posts that are about people and humans have a 561% more engagement than posts that are about companies and their brochure and their brochureware and their white paper and their sales kickoff and the award that they've won. People aren't interested in that.
no.
You are. You may be if you work for the company because it pays your mortgage, but nobody else is.
Yeah, and obviously it's a catch-22 thing, because if you're posting on LinkedIn trying to get engagement, if you see a post that has, like, let's say 1,000 comments, 10,000, likes, for example, thumbs up, you're more likely to be, intrigued. You're like, okay, if so many other people are finding it interesting and liking it, there might be something to it. Again, that's just, human nature, even if the content
It
is
is. It
rubbish.
is. I mean, one of the things that we explain to people is that you mentioned IBM earlier on. IBM has hundreds of thousands of people working for. They have millions of followers, but everybody in my company gets more engagement than IBM.
Hmm.
We're a small business. Why is that? We're not cleverer than IBM. They've got far more MBAs and PhDs and um, clever people working for them. The difference is about whether they understand digital, and they don't, because they still think that people come to social media to find out about IBM. We don't. We'd go to the website if we wanted to do that. Brochures. If you want to put out brochures, put them on your website. Don't put them on social media. And they still don't understand that personality beats brand every day.
Yeah, and I think a company that embodied it, very early on before social media was a thing was Apple with, Steve Jobs. Like the way people went crazy over Steve Jobs. And I feel like companies like Microsoft and even Google, they are doing more of that now. It's like, okay, if there's a Google presentation part of Alphabet is Sundar Pichai, and like, they like there's a few, like you see these presentations, you'll have the CEO, then you'll have a few of the other people below them. They're coming every single time. Like on Microsoft, this guy's talking about Surface, this guy's talking about Office products. Like they are trying to create, those, brands around certain individuals in the company, because like you said, they know that that's what's getting, interaction. That's what, people go crazy over is, Steve Jobs, not the iPhone. Steve Jobs presenting the iPhone, yes, but not the iPhone itself.
Yeah, I agree, and the importance of there's a reason why you should do that as a company. So far that we've talked about social selling. I mean, one of the things that we also do is that we help people um, use social within their human resources department. So hiring people, and you know, what we know is that your employees are on social media, and your future employees are on social media. So if you want to get the best talent, you need to be on social media yourself. One of our clients, for example, no longer pays for job ads or recruitment consultants because they have people coming to them saying, I've seen you on social media. You look like a great organization. I'd like to come and work for you. Now, Google's done a great job of this. Everybody wants to work at Google because, you get jelly beans on a slide in the office. And you're not going to argue when you go there. You'd say, yeah, and if they offered you a job, you just take it. You wouldn't be sitting there saying, "Yeah, but I can get another 5 grand from your competitor, or they've offered me another 5 days holiday, or they've got." You want to go and work for Google. So what they're able to do is that they're able to get the best talent by positioning themselves on social media, empowering their employees to talk about how great it is, and talk about um, what the employees want to talk about, because ultimately social media is about social and about the people. So you as an organization, your only unique selling point today is your people, their experiences, who they are, what they've done, what they think, their opinions. Um, and it's about empowering those people, not just the people in sales, but the people right across the organization, to talk on social media and have conversations, so that you become the best in sales, so that you become the employer of choice, um, so that you get invited into deals earlier on, because people will say, you seem to, we see you on social every day. You seem to know all about this particular subject. Um, can you come in and talk to our board about it? And that's the difference that we're seeing by empowering people by using social. It's not just about photos of your lunch and dog pictures. It's got a real business driver in terms of recruitment, in terms of revenue, the number of meetings you get, etc.
Yeah, I know that's something that I've struggled with over the years is, being able to say, okay, it's not just about the content, or, if you're, posting something on YouTube or even now, LinkedIn, like I'm in the middle of writing a post for LinkedIn because it's been about 2 years since I've been doing the podcast, or coming up to, the top 10, lessons, that I've learned,
Excellent.
actionable, real, lessons, not the sort of, everyday thing that everyone says, something that's actually useful.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Like the content that I'm seeing on LinkedIn, the stuff that's getting a lot of engagement, it usually has, even if the written content is good, it usually has like a random picture of the person. Like the picture's not even relevant to what they're doing. I'm like, you're sitting there with like a funny face on, or
Yeah.
literally like how they would do on Facebook, but the actual caption is now different, longer, better written, and it's about something professional, or you're sitting there on your computer with your cat, and it's like this has no relation to actually the post, but you're right. You do see more engagement for that because people are like, oh, that person got a cat, or that person's, looks nice, whatever. I'll give them the engagement for that reason,
Yes.
ignoring the content.
Yeah, and don't forget that any engagement on a platform, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, is that what a person is saying to you is that they're digitally resonating with you. So what they're doing is that they're showing you the digital resonance, whether that's they're just liking it or whether they're actually placing a comment. And that's a connection, and a connection that you can use and harvest. But it's a connection, and that's important, especially in the business sense.
Oh yeah, it's a huge part of it, and it's something like I was saying, with the post that I'm, in the process of writing up, and future posts. I'm gonna try and add more of, like you say, the human aspect, because ultimately I'm the one posting it, and experiment with that. Add a bit more of the human connection to it. Especially with the picture. 'Cause, again, that's the first thing that people are seeing, especially on LinkedIn, where the posts are significantly longer than Facebook. From what I'm seeing, I'm sure that's the case if you look at the statistics, and the first thing you are seeing is the picture, and that's the first thing you're gonna process it, because the body of the content is just too long to go through for everyone. So when you're scrolling, you're like, okay, that looks kind of interesting, let me click on that one. Or on the flip side, I'll see someone that is almost a kind of a titan in their industry, but their pictures, again, now thinking about it, they'll have a picture and it might be of, like you said, the product they're talking about. It's not of them, and their engagement isn't that much. And I will scroll through thinking, how are they not getting engagement? Like, how is this individual that's been so influential, so intelligent, and that has actual value in his marketplace, not getting engagement? Then this random person, like I said, with a cat with a funny face on in front of their computer that has RGB lights, is getting significantly more engagement.
Yeah, and that's because of the fact that, well, there's a number of unknowns, because you'll never know. You are not the judge of the content that you put out. Your audience are.
Yes.
But our research shows that people are coming to social media, LinkedIn, to have conversations. They're coming to social media to be entertained. They're not coming to social media to read your brochures.
No, they're not, and it just happens to be a side effect that they might read your brochure, or your ebook, or watch your video, or that's attached to it. It is, yeah, you're right, it's that human interaction, because as society does become more and more online, humans still want that social human interaction, and a lot of it that they're able to get is now online. And if they're not getting it from your post, they're going to get it from somebody else's post. So yeah, they do want to feel like they know you, the person, and almost like them, like, so, like, they'll, like, people will post on, comment on posts, and you're thinking, you don't even know the person, you don't even really believe in the product, but you're congratulating them on this or that, or you're saying how amazing things, like, it is literally having that interaction that you probably would have had 30, 40 years ago in real life, but now that has been removed for a lot of people, especially now that we do a lot of remote work, but they still want that interaction, and that's how they're getting it.
Yeah, and it's LinkedIn, is the way that LinkedIn works is similar to the way that a networking event or a cocktail party works, which is that you walk in, you get a drink, and then you probably walk up to somebody, and what you don't do is say, I'm Tim Hughes and I sell this, and this is what I do, because that would be deemed as rude. And what you do is you go up to somebody and say, have you travelled far? Did you get stuck in the M25 roadworks, or whatever the conversation is? And it's only after a certain bit where you might have a conversation about what you actually do. And what happens is that people have been so used to what is called broadcast marketing, which is where you just stand and tell people what you do, or interruption marketing, which is where you basically interrupt somebody and pitch. So, for example, cold calling, you cold call someone, you interrupt them, and then you pitch what you do. People are so used to doing that they think that social media is the same. And so what happens is that they think they might have seen something around social selling. So they think, okay, what I'll do is I'll come to social and I'll spam people like I've been doing over email. And what they'll find is that they'll get very little response. So we get a number of people coming to us saying, well, we tried social selling, it didn't work. And then I say, well, explain to me what you did. And it usually involves them spamming people and saying, well, no, that isn't social selling, that's spamming people. Um, so yeah, people need to. It's even though I've been on LinkedIn for 19 years and Twitter for 15 years. People still don't get or understand how to use social media as a way of driving meetings and then revenue.
No, they don't, and you're right. People do try and take what techniques may have worked to an extent from one medium and then just transfer it and assume that okay, it worked in one, it's gonna work in the other. So when you're, as someone that's doing the social selling, techniques with all your podcasts and your posts, are there particular times that you would recommend to post on days, and then especially on LinkedIn, or do you find that's not as important as the other aspects of your content that you post in?
Yeah, um, we don't find that there's a particular time that works. Some people say to do it 8 to 8:30 in the morning, so somebody will get pinged on their phone when they get a notification. But we don't really see that as being particularly. I wouldn't have said that gave you a lot of an edge. I think the thing about social media is that people will do it or use social media or go to social media when they have 5 minutes to spare, 10 minutes to spare of their own time. So they might be on a bus, on a train. They've got 5-10 minutes before going in a meeting. So the thing about social media is that you're always in this position that you can contact people and they'll come back to you when they want to. But no, we're not seeing that there needs to be a particular time. But you do have to be there. You do have to be present. Otherwise, you are invisible.
Oh yes, you do. So it's uh, my general experience is put stuff out there, refine it later on, figure where it is time, whether it is, the content, whatever, figure that out later. The perfect post does not exist. The perfect business idea doesn't exist. The perfect sales pitch doesn't exist, because if you're never actually trying to sell, nobody's gonna buy. Whereas if you try 100 times and you're like, okay, this isn't working, let me try this, and then that works, you wouldn't have got to that perfect, bit, because you didn't go through the 100 attempts that clearly failed.
Yeah, and I would always recommend with people to experiment. We've just trained a guy. He's a headhunter in Singapore, and he's now getting and he headhunts at a very senior level, at a VP or a director, C level. And he's now getting 3 meetings a day with these people purely by following the process. Um, he's putting out one post a day, and certainly on LinkedIn, you only need to be posting once. Um, he's doing in terms of his post, he's sharing some piece of expertise, and then as a picture, he's sharing a picture of himself in different places to give a human element to it. Um, and that's really working for him. Also, clearly, he's reaching out to people and having conversations online. But that seems to be working for him. So I don't think he's doing posting at a particular time. The important thing, as you say, is to post.
Yeah. Okay, so you raise an important little topic that is about the frequency. You were saying this person's posting once a day. That's all you need. And, I mean, I watched a video recently with Gary. No, actually, it was a podcast, I think, with Gary Vaynerchuk, and he was like, you need to pick the top three, four, platforms, including LinkedIn, and post 10 times a day on each platform. So, like, would you say that's for the most part BS advice? And it is, yes, frequent, but not so frequent that you're just pumping out, because based on his advice, that's 30 to 40 posts a day across all your social media. And that's assuming you're not obviously a social media, guy only. You're actually doing other stuff.
Yeah, I have the greatest respect for Gary, but he does say a load of rubbish sometimes. Um, First and foremost, which social media platform should you go to? Well, you should go to the one where your clients are hanging out. And in most cases, if you're in business, that will be on. If you're in B2B business, that will be on LinkedIn, um, and also maybe X as well. If you're business to consumer, then probably your clients are probably on TikTok or on Instagram. But let's just talk about business to business because that's what we deal with. On a LinkedIn perspective, I would you need to post on a daily basis. I would actually say that if you're posting, I can't remember what frequency you said that Gary said on LinkedIn. I think that actually
10.
people 10. I think people will get pissed off with you, and I think that they'll unfollow you or disconnect or block you. It the platform just doesn't support that level of posting,
Yeah.
and there's no, whenever you post something, you're going to be front of mind with your clients. This is the great thing about social media is that how many times can I call you every day? Well, probably not every day, probably not even every week. You might get away with calling me once a month. The same with sending me spam emails. I mean, how often can you do that? So, but with social media, you can literally be waving to your network every single day. And on LinkedIn, I would just post once a day. Uh, X or Twitter is slightly different because of the way that the algorithm works and the way that um, so on X, the way that the algorithm works is in effect each post goes on top of each other. It's a linear it's a linear algorithm. It's not presenting to you because somebody is influential or whatever. It's there's an equality in terms of the posts, or most people have that as the option on their Twitter. So I tweet 20 times a day on Twitter or X, and I use Buffer to do that to schedule at different times. Um, Whereas on LinkedIn, I don't use any scheduling at all. I do it manually because LinkedIn doesn't like scheduling or scheduling. The algorithm doesn't like anything coming from outside of LinkedIn and will actually downgrade you. But I will post on LinkedIn probably once a day, and that's it. And that's all you need to do.
Okay. And on something like LinkedIn, because as we've already spoken about, the length of the posts are definitely longer from what I'm seeing than a platform like, obviously, Twitter is short anyway, so you can't compare it to that. But something like Facebook, where you can put a lengthy post out there, I don't see them as much compared to on LinkedIn. Well, is there an ideal length that you find, or for a particular type of content? Is some stuff, it has to be a minimum, or it's just too small for LinkedIn, or that's just too long from some content?
I think in most cases, on most platforms, people are looking for snackable content.
Hmm.
They're looking for something that they can read quickly. On X, in effect, most people will read the headline and that will be it. And it's always been that very much about reading the headline. You can actually write longer tweets now, but um, it's usually when if people will read it if you've got something to say and it's insightful. Um, but on LinkedIn, you're really looking to provide something that is snackable, that somebody that can read quickly. Now, there's two things about LinkedIn. One is that there's a post, and the other is that there's a blog, and they're two different things. So a post will last for 6 months, and Google does not index it. A blog lasts forever, and Google indexes it. A post, from its very nature, is preferred by the algorithm and therefore will get you more likes and comments. Whereas a blog will get you less likes and comments, except Google indexes it and it will be there forever. So it kind of depends what you want. Um, what I'm doing is I'm building a library of content because I always want to be found on Google. Um, and I actually, what I do is I actually, everything that I do is blogs. I don't do posts, but other people may feel that a post is more applicable for them, and so what they do is that they do that. And yes, you will get more dopamine because of the fact that you'll probably get more engagement.
Okay, and with Twitter, X as it is
Yeah.
now, called, do you find there's actually still do you think it's still that important to use as someone that's posting content for business purposes to get engagement, or is something like LinkedIn just far better, and Instagram as well now?
The thing about Facebook and LinkedIn is that they are walled gardens. What Facebook and LinkedIn have done is shut down all of the old accesses to APIs, and they've done that because of the Cambridge Analytica um, thing that happened a number of years ago. So social media listening tools, we use a product called Brand24, can't access those platforms. And what those platforms do is that they show how influential you are on social media. Um, and it will show you from open platforms. So for example, X, TikTok, which products like Brand24 can get access to. If you if you are somebody who wants to be an influencer, and I'm talking about an influencer with a small I rather than a big I. So I'm not talking about being Kim Kardashian, um, but somebody who is influential, who gets invited onto podcasts or whatever. If you are looking to do that, then you need to be on LinkedIn, but you also need to be on a platform like X or TikTok, because the tools that are being used to see who is influential can only get access them. They can't access LinkedIn or Facebook. So if you want to be a public speaker, or and get make a living by speaking at conferences and stuff, you have to be on X and TikTok. X is still a platform where you can do everything that you're doing on LinkedIn in terms of finding people, connecting to them, having conversations with them that you then may take to a Teams call or a Zoom call, where ultimately you're going to go through a process of having a conversation and then having some sort of commercial interaction, where you may be ultimately selling something. So you can still use Twitter as a mechanism to do that. But Twitter, if you're looking to get any sort of inbound from um, speaker conferences or anything like that, you need to be on X for sure.
So, before we start, wrapping up, I want to ask you, about your podcast. You say, you're running or you're part of 4 podcasts.
We run 4 podcasts across the business. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are those, podcasts, and how frequently do you post on, them? And what's your recommend? Like, what have you found, works for you in podcasting? Because again, that's a little. You're not posting, definitely not posting 10 podcasts a day, or even one a day is probably going to be a struggle. So, like, so one, what are they, and then two, what's the sort of frequency that you found that works for you?
Okay, so there's my main podcast is a podcast called Tim Talk, which is a play on the TED Talk name. It's a classic talking heads podcast where there's 2 of us. There's the person that I'm interviewing. I've been running this since 2021, and I've interviewed over 450 people. And it's a 20-minute conversation. I always do. So you're asking what works. So I always do a preparation call before, maybe even weeks or months before. So on that preparation call, I go through a process of explaining what the podcast is about, and then we go through a structure and we agree a structure. So on the day, the person comes across as the expert. Um, we use a product called Restream, which is a bit like StreamYard, and we use that across all of our podcasts. Um, we have another podcast on Fridays. It's at 2 p.m. UK time, and it's called The Digital Download. And it's the longest running business talk show on LinkedIn Live. It's just gone past its 3-year anniversary. And we also syndicate that out onto internet radio. So it goes out on the IBGN internet radio, and it also goes, which is now on TuneIn. So it goes out through the a big access to the TuneIn audience. And that actually came about through something that we were doing during COVID, which was that I saw a lot of people on LinkedIn saying that they were running these meetings, which I called Stand by the Bed meetings, which is where they got together at 8 or 8:30 in the morning, and they then had to explain how much they love the company and how much they were going to be working hard that day, working at home, and
The
then
daily stand-ups, yes.
yeah. So and it was like they had to stand and salute, and I said, I'm not doing that, but I think it's important that we get everybody together. I run a 100% remote organization, and we don't have any offices at all. So I said, we're gonna run a call this, and you just turn up. There's no agenda, and talk about anything. Talk about what you're doing, and quite often those turn to talk about work. Some people told jokes or whatever, but it was just a way of getting everybody together and getting them to at least talk um, during that time. And it was during one of those calls where someone said, "Why don't we do this as a podcast? We all get onto a call, and we get on chat." And we started doing that probably for the first year and a half, and now um, we now have guests on who we chat. But it's there can be anything between 3 of us and 7 of us, all internal to my organization as a panel, and we basically interview the guests. So that's a very different format from the one-to-one conversation that I do. Um, my colleagues also run something on a Tuesday morning UK time and afternoon UK time, but would be the morning US time. And that's called SalesTV.live, and that's purely a sales um, podcast. Again, that can have it's classic talking heads, but it's probably got 3 people from my company and a guest. And the fourth one is what my business partner Adam Gray runs, and he runs that every Friday at 4 p.m., which is called That Album, which is where he gets on a podcast for an hour, and he has a guest on, and they talk about a particular album, and they play um, tracks from it, and the person will talk about maybe they remember something from it, maybe they had a particular impression upon them, maybe it was music that inspired them or something like that. And because it's live on LinkedIn, there's no copyright restrictions in terms of playing music, or they don't seem to have that sort of problem. Clearly, if you he never uploads that to YouTube because you always get blocked from copyright. Um, so yeah, they're the four podcasts we do. They're all very different. Reach out to different audiences, different subject areas, um, and I think it's a great variety, really.
So before we, do wrap up, I just want to, ask, one final question.
Mm.
We've touched on it multiple times, but just, in a concise way, what advice, would you give to someone that is, is trying to sell something? Like, again, it could be themselves, it could be an actual product, it could be them trying to start a freelancing business, whatever it is. What is that sort of really actionable advice that you've seen time and time again? Even if it takes work, it works.
Yeah. So the three things that you need to do is, first and foremost, you need to have a biocentric profile. So it's a profile that's written not about how great you are, but a profile that's written about um, your buyers. You need to put yourself in the shoes of your buyers. Why would a buyer come to your profile and read it and be interested? And saying things like, I've been in President's Club the last of the 4 5 years isn't interesting to your buyer. It's interesting to you, but not your buyer. And this is about your authentic you, who you are, not somebody that you're trying to be on social media, because we'll soon find out when we have a conversation that you're not the person that you say that you are. So it's about your authentic you. It's about telling a story about what you've done, and what you think and how you've achieved it. If you come to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see my LinkedIn profile is very different from everybody's. And anybody in my company is at the high water mark of what a good profile should look like. The second thing that you need is you need to have a network. So you need to be connected to the people that you're trying to influence, maybe the people that you're trying to sell to. Because if you're not connected to them, you're invisible. To do that, you need to do that in a non-spammy way, and this is again about your buyer, not about you. So this isn't about you turning up and saying, "Hey, I'm the best salesperson in the world, and I've got some stuff to sell to you." You wouldn't say that at the networking event. So you don't do that on social media. This is about connecting with somebody and understanding the buyer and being interested in them. The third thing that you need is insightful content that people are going to learn from. So this is not about your company and your products. It's not about a brochure, because brochures all say the same thing, which is buy my product because we're great. Nobody reads them because we know exactly you're just going to say how great your company is, so we don't bother. What we're looking for is insight. So, great example is what you said earlier on. So, my podcast is coming up for 2 years. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share 10 learnings that I've got from the podcast. That's a great way of people will read that and go, well, I'm thinking of setting up a podcast, but wow, these learnings are good. Maybe this person actually knows what they're talking about. Or I'm running a podcast at the moment, it's not really working for me, and this person clearly has run a podcast for 2 years and clearly has learned a whole load of stuff that I don't know. So what you're doing is that you're sharing insight, you're sharing knowledge with people, you're telling people things that they don't know. Why? Because they're looking for an expert, they're looking for someone that's going to help them. And the only way that you're going to do that is by having a profile that people see you as a human being, someone they can trust, that you're going to be in their network, and you're putting out content where they go, that's really interesting, that's really exciting. You like mountain biking. I like mountain biking as well. I've been on these trails in Revelstoke in Canada, or whatever it is. It's about making that human connection. And you can do that through your profile by connecting to people and by putting out insightful and helpful content.
Tim, I just want to, thank you for coming on
You're
today,
welcome.
and the discussions we've had. I know I've learned a lot. I'm definitely gonna go and buy your book. Actually, I'm gonna ask if you can. I'm happy to pay for it, but get a signed copy of you. I'd love that. But yeah, that's a side note. I'm definitely gonna check out that.
Yep.
But regarding your book, so I'll get all the links, including your podcast as well, and anything else that we discussed. If you just send me those links, I'll put them, in the description for this podcast, so everyone can just, easily access,
Okay.
those, books and the podcast themselves. So
And
yeah.
and just so people know, the book they need to get is Social Selling: Techniques to Influence Buyers and Change Makers. It's the second edition with the yellow cover.
Okay, second edition with the yellow cover. So, guys, if you listen, that is the one to get. And like I said, I'm looking forward to get hold of that as well. I've learned a lot. I'm sure my listeners have learned a lot as well. So, again, Tim, thank you for coming on. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
It's been great talking to you.
And thank you, everyone else, for tuning in to this week's episode of FireDEV. I'll see everyone next week. Bye bye.